Anyhow, greetings from Smoky, California. If you haven't seen this book over here on the left, there might be some nuggets for you down the line. One of the lead author of that, so available on Amazon if you're interested. But why are we talking about high performing teams? Okay, it's really about how do we get the innovation. I mean, that's what owners are really all about. Okay, and people have, if you've not heard of Frederick Winslow Taylor, he's the father of industrial management philosophies that are still in place today, and that has really created a lot of issues for us. Made tremendous sense in industrialized revolution, not so much in today's world. And here's why. Okay, in an industrialized world, you went into a kind from a agrarian to a complicated culture, if you will. And the world that we live in now is getting more and more complex. So think about all of the pieces that touch a project that we're involved with. I mean, we have at least a dozen design disciplines, as many as 40 trades, commissioning agents, multiple stakeholders. It becomes very complex in a hurry. And so the remnant from Taylorism is really this command and control structure, if you will. And we still set up a lot of our projects this way. If you look at proposal responses, you'll see lots of organization charts that look like this on the left. Okay, IPD is moving more towards the right. We saw this slide yesterday, but in a lot of cases, there's still an opportunity to move beyond reporting to a bottleneck and really engaging the discussions and the interactions and the information flow and decision making that comes from a team-to-team concept. So teaming, Amy Edmondson has done a tremendous amount of work on teaming at Harvard, but teaming is a verb, okay? It's dynamic. And really, it's a function of mindset and practices of teamwork, and you don't design it and structure it, okay? It's really setting up a culture for teaming. And so how do you do that? Well, you have to start with a foundation of psychological safety. And if you're not familiar with that term, that's really allowing people the opportunity to feel safe in the environment that they are in, to not be punished or be embarrassed, but really an opportunity to share. And people fear being seen as ignorant. Okay, so if you hear people not communicating or not participating or not being engaged, we saw the rowboat here yesterday at the keynote. But if they are perceived as ignorant, incompetent, negative, or disruptive, then they clam up. And the problem with that is it doesn't allow us to leverage all of their experience and expertise. So if we look at psychological safety versus accountability, if you have high psychological safety and you have high accountability, you really get into the learning zone, which is really where we can have innovation and the outcomes that we desire from an innovative environment. Conversely, if we have low psychological safety and we have high accountability, people are stressed, they're anxious, okay? I'm not going to talk about the comfort and apathy zone, but apathy, disengaged, that's not where we want to be. So how do you do this? Well, Simon Sinek has what he calls the circle of safety, okay? And how do we get everybody into the circle of safety and allow them to engage and participate? So the world is full of dangerous things, fires and Tasmanian devils, etc. And once you're in the circle of safety, what happens? Well, vulnerability becomes an opportunity, okay? And Brene Brown has done a lot of work in research tied to vulnerability, and a lot of us perceive it as a weakness. And she articulates that it's our greatest measure of courage, and it's a really interesting phenomenon on the vulnerability because it requires uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. Okay, and what's important is that without it, we lose some people's best ideas, okay? I think it was Jessica yesterday said that, hey, if you shut somebody down the first time, you're not going to get any further input from that individual ever. Furthermore, you just influenced 8 other people on the team that saw what happened. Oh, I'm not going to go there. So it's really important that people can be vulnerable. So let me tell you a story of a superintendent. We went to this project. It was about $100 million project. and gotten a call from the project manager, project executive actually saying, hey, I don't have confidence our team is going to meet the milestone completion date of this project. We're only 3 months out. We got a lot of balls in the air. Can you come in and see if you can help us out? So the first thing we do, we show up, the superintendent, grizzled veteran, 40 years in the industry, pulls me aside into a closed room and says, okay, what'd they tell you? Why are you really here? And I said, well, been asked to come and evaluate, whether you think you guys can make it in 90 days, where are the real issues and how we might be able to help. And he had shared that he'd been working so hard on trying to do things, he actually broke down in tears and was thankful for the help. And the moral of the story there is the vulnerability of this 40-year grizzled superintendent allowed us to really help him help the team accomplish what they needed to do. But without that, it would have been a pretty tough battle. Okay, so how do you end up getting people into that circle of safety and psychologically safe an environment? You saw yesterday there's some great slides about Lego Serious Play. We love to use this as an approach, but allow people to tell stories. Stories are not threatening. If people have questions about the story, you question the story. You don't question the person. You really say, well, help me understand that. But you'll see, looking at this, you've got lifeboats, you have tigers, etc. But people get to tell stories, and in this particular one, they got to build models that were really tied to something on their contribution to the team. Okay, how could they contribute to the team? And so here are some of the models that came out, or artifacts that came out of there. Okay, so you have somebody here that's leading, but the sharks are trying to eat people, and tigers are trying to roll over people. And by the way, the man-eating tigers or woman-eating tigers are chasing everybody. Okay. In this case, somebody was really providing a safety net. Hey, we have to cross this bridge and get to our desired outcome. And I've got a teammate down here that's got me covered in case we stumble. Okay. Another artifact, okay, getting everyone aligned. We're all going in the same direction. We've got our boundaries, we understand our constraints, and we all feel safe within the boundaries that we've established for ourselves. Which kind of leads us to empathy, okay? We heard a little bit about design thinking earlier today, but you can't deliver solutions if you don't understand what it is that people are experiencing and what problems you're trying to solve. So go back to the industrial age again. Here's Henry Ford. But here's the takeaway from this. One secret of success is really to see the world through another's point of view and from that person's angle as well as your own. So really being empathetic. Okay. So how do you do that? Well, there are some high-performing team empathy simulations. This is actually, I know we have a bunch of Canadians participating in this summit. This is a toy called the Empathy Toy, which was developed by a Canadian company. But as you can see, these are blindfolded members of a team. This is actually a graduate course that I teach at San Diego State. And the idea is this. I give a model to the person on the right here, which has got the brown wood, and the person on the left has to build the same thing with the same model pieces, and it has to be described by the other person. So it talks about clarity of words. It talks about clarity of communication. It talks about how is the other people or other person responding to my comments? Is it working? Do I need to rethink how I'm structuring that communication so it's more effective? Okay. And you can make it more interesting by having others observe and or participate, cited or uncited. Very, very interesting group of students tied to this. You can see that the person on the left has been struggling a little bit to make it happen. But where does this take us? Okay, so start with psychological safety, which leads to vulnerability. And if we integrate empathy, we get to a point where we have developed trust. Okay, you've heard a lot about trust earlier, but that's the foundation of how relationships are built. That's the foundation of how collaboration happens. Okay, I like to call it the bank of trust, but I mean that's how you start setting up an environment for a high-performing team. So let's talk about the next piece of this. So people are trusting, and what motivates us. Okay, we've heard a little bit about this, but this is a slide from some Dan Pink work. But people want to have a purpose. Okay, taking money off the table, but a purpose. So they want to be able to contribute. They want meaning to their work. They want to be able to master their skills and get better at what they do. And they also want to be able to be self-directed so that they can do that. Self-direction without alignment creates kind of a wild, wild west. But these three things are what really motivate us. And if we understand that as team members, then we can do some great things. So quick story about two stonemasons. First stonemason was asked, "What are you doing?" "I'm building a wall." Second stonemason was asked, "What are you doing?" "I'm building a cathedral." So the second stonemason, much more engaged, as you might think, a sense of purpose, participating in something bigger than themselves. Okay. Very powerful. We just did some work with this team up at Project Gutenberg up near Portland, but their aspiration, and with a name like Project Gutenberg, is pretty awesome. It is a pharmaceutical facility where they are going to be using DNA technology to recombinant RNA technology to develop personalized cancer treatments for individuals based on their genomic sequence. Very, very powerful. Everyone understands that's what we're trying to do, and that really aligns people to a higher purpose. So, trust is our boat, and inspiration is our wind. Okay, this comes from Simon Sinek. So as we're moving forward, we need a common vocabulary and a common understanding. Okay, we see that this is a problem for a challenge for a lot of teams. But we like to use the elephant story. So you have 6 blindfolded people in this case, but they're all looking at the same thing and they all see something different. Okay, so for a high performance team, how do you end up establishing a common vocabulary and a common understanding of what it is that you're trying to do? Aligning your goals. Okay. And I have to give it credit to Stan Chu for this one. Stan, if you're on here today, but he showed this at a presentation, I guess 2 summers ago. But the idea here is what's happening in nature. These are starlings in Texas. And look at how they're aligned. How do they develop these kind of shapes and know where to move? Okay. This is where we would like to be from a high performing team. Everyone understands their role, understands their responsibilities, and if we all move together, we can accomplish fantastic things and move forward. So this is actually a pharmaceutical client in Ireland, and this was actually kind of a story map that was developed by the plant manager to help the team understand why are we doing this project? Why is it important? Okay. And if we look at this, if we look at the bottom right-hand side here, this was extremely powerful. Where you see the 4, but exercise, name family member and illness. So we actually put a chart on the wall with various illnesses and pharmaceuticals that were going to be produced in this plant to treat each of those illnesses. And every single person in the room, and there were about 80 people in the room, every single person had it posted up there with someone in their family or a close family friend with an illness, and it made it personal for everybody on the project. And all of a sudden now we were not just building a production facility or production train, we were building something that was going to help one of our family members. Very, very powerful. Okay, so looking quickly at, we've heard a lot about having true north. So this is for a new engineering building at University of California, San Diego. But here are the things that the team came up with that, hey, if we hit these 8 things, we know we're going to have been successful. Okay. This is a team up at Los Angeles International Airport, but they went through a similar exercise. Okay, with there's kind of 2 parts. On the left-hand side, what are our values? What's true north for us as a team? And this is, the owner, the builder, the trades, the design team, they all participated in developing this. And then just to the right of that is we will, and actually committed to behaviors that they were going to use as a team. And then here on the right, everyone signed off on it at the time that we did it and was given the opportunity. If you don't agree, now's the time to talk about it. Powerful. You've heard people talk about conditions of satisfaction, but the idea here is that if you have major elements, this comes back to another pharmaceutical project, but how do you measure that? This was a kind of a first pass, and they did additional refinement, but I wanted to include this in the slide deck so that as you have a takeaway, you can kind of think through this offline on, wow, okay, yeah, that makes sense. That's qualitative. This is quantitative. This is a process metric versus a results-based metric. Some of it's behavioral, some of it's really tied to project metrics. Okay. So how do you end up working with teams to kind of get them there in a COVID-19 environment? Well, we did a high-performing team workshop with a company using an online simulation. This is actually a board game, but it's rooted in organizational behavior theory and gamification theory. And the idea is this: you've got a multinational global team with a global challenge, and you play in 3 rounds to basically get your team to a high-performing team. So looking at the board, you start down in the bottom level, bottom left, and you're trying to work your way to the top right. And you have on the left-hand side some stakeholders that can influence the team. Okay, so think about that with respect to either people in organizations that are not part of the team, or that may be part of the owner or customer team that can have distinct influence. But there are ways in COVID-19 to move forward with doing that. Here are some charter words that were captured in Wordle. So after a chartering workshop or True North, what were all the things that really stuck out? That you could see: trust, communication, team, respect. Very, very common themes. And so we want to talk about diversity. We talked a little bit about that over the course of the last day and a half, but this is a really big deal. Our industry doesn't have as much diversity as perhaps it should, but there are multiple types of diversity. You've got diversity by separation, which is distance. You have disparity, which could be status or rank. So think about it based on the relative level of responsibility within an organization. And probably the biggest one is variety, which is knowledge, experience, and education. Most project teams that we see or have somewhere between 500 and 1,200 years of experience between them when they're trying to leverage. So that's a lot of knowledge and experience and education to bring to bear on a project or problem. How do you, what's your creative type? There's a diversity there as well. This is something we did online as part of an alignment partnering session. But you can see here that pretty good distribution among these 8 creative types. You can do a deeper dive on this if you want. I'd be glad to share that information later. But great team building exercise, great takeaways about, hey, we all think differently, we all create differently. How do we use that to the benefit of the project? Some more Lego serious play. This was actually for a project where the team was, well, what's one thing that you think we really have to address as part of this particular project? So what are the problems that you see? And it was really tied, this was an airport project, to the customer experience. So you as a let's just say a flight passenger, what's your experience from the time you leave home to the time that you get to your destination, and what are the things that have to be addressed as part of that? Very, very powerful. So I've been sharing all this, but why is diversity important? Well, it's the antidote to groupthink. We occasionally go and work with organizations, and everyone has a similar personality, and Rex was talking about this yesterday morning as well. And it can develop groupthink and develop blinders and not allow the team to have the innovation. If we're getting back to the whole reason for high performing teams, the innovation may just not be there because there are blind spots that the team's just not aware of. Okay, so we talk about team contracts, and this is something we like to do. So how are you going to behave as a team? What's in the circle is what you're going to do. What's outside the circle is what you're not going to do. Okay, and if someone ends up not buying into that or not behaving according to that, the tribe is spoken and you're voted off the island. Okay, change your people or change your people, but that's essentially a contract of behavior for the team. Pretty powerful. Okay, so that takes us to the big room. So most of us in this virtual summit have participated in some type of a physical big room. This is one at Los Angeles International Airport. You see there's quite a bit of diversity there, and age and race and experience and education and backgrounds. So a lot of diversity to bring to bear. And the importance of daily stand-ups or daily huddles. On this particular point, they are still in design for the Canadians that were showing some of their agile sprint boards here earlier. So this is a sprint board for one of their deliverables, and they're doing a daily stand-up. You could still do these types of things in a COVID environment. So this is an alignment partnering session with a team that's well into construction, but just doing a real kind of a check-in to how are we doing? How's COVID-19 impacting us? Are there things that we should be doing differently? And people came out of this saying that using the breakout rooms was even a more intimate experience than doing it in person. So that takes us to how could we? We're getting back to the innovation, right? We heard a little bit about design thinking earlier, but how do we end up addressing the problems? We've got to have some empathy, number one, but we diverge in all of our possible discoveries, converge onto defining what our problem is, and then prototype, test, refine, and develop multiple solutions using a set-based design approach or ideation, and then really kind of converging onto a solution at the appropriate time. So, daring greatly, and we're running close, but we're almost finished here. Another Brene Brown quote, but high-performing teams have the courage to actually be vulnerable and to ask for what you need and say how they're feeling and have the hard conversations. Okay, and there's an importance of interruptions. If you're in a group meeting, if something doesn't make sense to you, and that comes back to the whole environment of psychological safety, is that, hey, I don't understand that. Can I ask a question on why do we think that's important, or have we thought about that? We've seen this time after time happen where people were in a kind of a groupthink mode, and all of a sudden someone asks a very probing question, and the team comes up with an entirely different approach to the or solution to the problem, all by just asking that simple question. Failure leads to success, and by learning. Okay, so fail early, fail often, particularly if we're looking at prototyping. Another Henry Ford quote: "Don't find fault, find a remedy." Okay, so someone was talking about the Marshmallow game here earlier. So these are a bunch of engineers doing rapid prototyping and really using a design thinking approach to their project, and really looking at opportunities from a target value design perspective. Here are the high impact things that we can evaluate and the relative level of difficulty. So this is a pharmaceutical project, but they were just focusing on things that could have a real significant impact on the project, and which ones should we really focus on? And that's the high impact, low effort. Which takes us to servant leadership. In high performing teams, people should always conclude a conversation: is there anything more you need from me, or is there anything that I can do for you? You get into the habit of doing that, good things happen. And you will find that people will start asking for what they need, and they also will start feeling that they're psychologically safe. So in summation here, kind of the 5 key takeaways for today. Okay, psychological safety, vulnerability, and empathy lead to trust. Trust is a foundation of collaboration. Autonomy, mastery, and purpose are what motivate people. Alignment and autonomy with the foundation of trust are necessary for high-performing teams, and team behavior matters. So those are the 5 takeaways I would like for you to have with respect to high-performing teams.
David, thank you very much. I'm conscious we started a couple of minutes later, so I think we've got about 2 or 3 minutes for Q&A now. And I think your presentation certainly prompted a bit of thought in the room. So I'll very quickly just put a few of the questions to you. What strategies have you had success with getting teams to spend their time to invest in HPT team building efforts and budget?
Okay. So how have we managed to do that? Well, is that owners are a big driver in this. If there's an owner that is actually thoughtful about this, they will actually call this out either as part of their agreement, whether they're doing that in an IFOA, whether they're doing that in some other type of contractual arrangement. But an enlightened owner that understands the benefit of this is huge. If you've got to sell it, then that's a tough. That's always a tough road. I think Tom Rickert talked about that yesterday. If you're in a sell mode, that's not a good sign. But what I will share, and there was a comment that was made by George Zettel earlier today, that what we see is that teams that are high performing are ones that are willing to make the time and effort to build the team. And I think Rex and talked about this yesterday, where really focusing on the first 100 days and how did the Smart Start work on that. So.
Thanks, David. A really interesting question here as well from Benjamin Foreman, just asking, he says, David, thank you for the great examples and components of highly functional teams. Could you comment on some false positives / red flags where teams look like they're on the right path, but some corrections are needed?
Well, there are several things that we encourage teams to do. One is that we always start with a trust survey somewhere early on in the project. So what is the level of trust of the team on a scale of 1 to 10? And that becomes kind of the baseline, if you will. We see that most teams are somewhere in the 7.5 range. Lately, we've been seeing a couple of teams in the 8 range as kind of their baseline, which is phenomenal. But tracking that over time, and it's a very easy thing to do. Check in. You can do it anonymously via SurveyMonkey or all kinds of different ways. And just have even in your staff meeting, you have people fill out a piece of paper and someone tally it up and calculate a mean. But what we find is that how does that trend over time? Is it going the right direction? Is it going the wrong direction? That really is an early indicator of, hey, we've got some trust issues and we really need to do something about that. Otherwise, we're going to have some really serious issues. I think yesterday there were some examples given of spider diagrams and other types of team assessment surveys where teams are actually identifying, here are the 6 things that are important to us as a team, and then monitoring how are we doing relative to those on some periodic basis. Those are great indicators, and that allows people the opportunity to provide feedback into that system. And if you look at some of the, coming back to the trust survey, we just recently did one where there were people with 10s and people with 1s. 1 being, I don't trust anybody in this room, and 10 to everyone's got my back. And what that does is it tells you that there are some issues there that really need to be addressed. And if you can't address those that are coming from a 1 perspective and build that trust, then perhaps they're not the right people to be on this team.
Great. Thanks, David. Really enjoyable talk, and appreciate you taking the time to do the Q&A there as well.